In 1878, a domestic worker in the United States touched a telephone for the first time and felt the world fold. In 2025, her great-great-granddaughter decided to turn off her smartphone and walk home the long way. Between those two moments, 150 years of technology that changed everything. I spent years teaching that history. Then I wrote the novel I wish I'd had. When I was teaching classes on the history of information technologies, the hardest thing wasn't the facts. It was making students feel what it was like to live through these changes. You can show a timeline: telegraph, telephone, radio, television, internet, social media, AI. But the timeline doesn't tell you what it felt like when a switchboard operator realized her job made the most connected person in her town and the most invisible one. Or what it meant for a family in Senegal when the radio arrived and suddenly the colonial language was in their living room every evening. Or what happened in a Colombian village when the telephone came but only one family could afford it. And overnight, that family became the gatekeeper of every piece of news. Technology doesn't arrive evenly, it arrives politically. That's why the novel follows three families: the Johnsons in the United States, the Garcías in Colombia, and the Diops in Senegal. Same technologies, completely different experiences. When the telegraph arrives in the US, it's a business tool. When it arrives in Senegal, it's an instrument of colonial administration. When radio comes to Colombia, it becomes the voice of political movements, and then the target of governments that want to silence them. Each family lives through the same century of innovation, but the technology means something different in each place because power shapes who benefits and who gets controlled. The thing I wanted to get right, the thing that textbooks always missed, was the human scale. Not the telephone was invented in 1876, but what happened in a household the first time a voice came through a wire, the wonder of it, and then the loss, because once you call someone, you stop writing letters, and something in the quality of connection shifts. The novel tracks that across 6 generations. Each technology brings something and takes something. The telegraph killed the handwritten dispatch. The telephone killed the telegraph. Email killed the letter. Social media killed, well, we're still figuring out what social media killed. The last third of the novel moves into territory that is still unfolding. Content moderators in the Philippines reviewing the worst of the internet for 12 hours a day. A DACA recipient whose entire legal identity exists in a digital system she can't control. Deepfakes that make it impossible to trust what you see. And then AI, not as science fiction, but as the latest in a 150-year pattern of technologies that promise connection and deliver something more complicated. The novel ends in 2025, but the pattern does not. I wrote this because when I was teaching, I wanted a book that made this history feel lived, not abstracted into timelines and patent dates, but felt through the people whose daily lives were reshaped by each new technology. A book that showed the unevenness, that a telephone in Manhattan and a telephone in Dakar are not the same event. A book my students could read and suddenly understand that the smartphone in their pocket is the latest chapter in a story that started with a wire and a key. The novel asks, who controls information? What do we lose when we gain speed? When do the tools start using us? I don't pretend to have the answers, but after 150 years, I think the questions are worth asking out loud. Echoes of Connection, available in English and Spanish, Kindle and paperback. Links in the description. RicardoGomez.net. If you've ever taught technology history or lived through it, this was written for you.